Good morning to you and welcome to the Vicarage here on this lovely Friday morning. Great to see you and I hope you're looking forward to the weekend, and thank you for joining us today. Remind you, as it's the weekend, we have a full after services at St Bart's and St Anne's, and actually I want to give a special plug this week for St Anne's. We have two churches, St Bart's and St Anne's, which is in Lower Penn. They have a service every week at 11:45, so it's friendly, it's lively, it's very informal, it's relaxed. Every couple of months they do a bring and share, so there's food as well. And they're just a great bunch of people, and they're lively and they're on fire for God, and you get a lie-in because it's 11:45 Sunday morning as well. So I would encourage you, if you've never had a worship down at St Anne's, pop them down there one day, go and join them. It's a lovely service, and I'm sure very relaxed, easygoing, very friendly, but very lively congregation down there. I'm sure they'd love to see you. But all our services are on this weekend. We're live streaming from St Bart's at 10 o'clock on Sunday, and all for there to you to enjoy and worship God together this weekend. Friends, we're in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 12, and Jesus has been explaining and encountering some of the challenges, and there's some of the challenges that we encounter too. So I'm going to pick it up now at Matthew chapter 12, starting to read at verse 33. There's a lot in this. I'll try and unpack it for you afterwards. Here goes. Matthew 12, starting to read at verse 33. Jesus said, "Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good things when you are evil? For out of the abundance of your heart the mouth speaks. The good person speaks good out of a good treasure, and the evilest person speaks evil out of an evil treasure. I tell you, on the day of judgment, you'll have to give account for every careless word you utter. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." Then some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so for 3 days and 3 nights the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth. The people of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented at the proclamation of Jonah, and see, something greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to listen to the wisdom of Solomon, and see, something greater than Solomon is here. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it wanders through waterless regions looking for a resting place, but finds none. Then it says, I'll return to my house from which I came. When it comes, it finds it empty, swept and put in order. Then it goes and brings along 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and live there, and the last state of that person is worse than the first. So will it be also with this evil generation." While he was still speaking to the crowds, his mother and his brothers were standing outside, wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Look, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." But to the one who had told them this, Jesus replied, "Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?" And pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. All in 7 minutes. Right, some of the encounters, the issues and challenges Jesus encounters in this morning reading. Firstly this. People say sometimes, the church is just full of hypocrites, isn't it? You've heard that said before. Well, And is the church full of hypocrites? Honest answer to that question, of course it is. I always say, if you find a perfect church, don't join it because you'll spoil it. And of course, there are hypocrites in church. Absolutely right. And in fact, there's also good and bad in all of us too. And, I often say, if you think about good and bad people, think about good people that don't come to church, I want to say sometimes think how much better they'd be if they did come to Christ. And bad people in church, I want to say sometimes think how much worse they'd be if they didn't. Well, what Jesus says here, he says, obviously, inevitably, in the church, of course, there are good and there are bad people, and it's important that we do what we can to separate them out. But the answer is, by their fruits, you will know them. In other words, in time, you will see the fruits that they give off. Some people create division and so on in a congregation and stuff, and other people bring people close to Christ and are loving and caring and courageous in their faith and that sort of stuff. He says, "By their fruits shall you know them," and also by the things that they say. In time you'll see. That kind of stuff. It becomes clear after a while who the good ones and the bad ones aren't. But he gives a kind of word of advice too, to make sure to us that we are on the right side of the line. And he basically says, it comes from the heart. What he says is an outpouring. What you say is an outpouring of what comes from the heart. So I think he's saying to us, start from the inside out, not the other way around. Get your heart right, and the rest of it will follow. If your heart's in the right place, good stuff will automatically come out in your mouth. So he's saying, get your heart right, and everything else will follow. So you can tell the good ones and the bad ones over time, actually, by their fruits, the things that the fruits of what they do. And for us, the advice is get your heart right, and the rest will follow. That's the first thing. Second thing is you have people here asking for a sign. Now, this is bizarre because actually, Jesus has done quite a few signs, I think we could say, stilling the storm, healing loads of people, and casting out demons. I'd have thought that would be sign enough. In other words, they weren't really looking. And Jesus won't play with them and basically says, the evil and adulterous generation ask for a sign, In other words, you ask, but you're not really looking. And he points to the sign of Jonah in the Old Testament. And he points out that in the same way that Jonah was down for 3 days and then came up again, in the same way he in time will go down, of course, and then up again. He'll go down on Good Friday and come up again on Easter Sunday. And that will be the sign. In other words, I think what he's saying here is what he's going to do is the greatest sign of all. But also, I think often if people want to see signs, you've got to look. And they weren't really looking. I think that's the problem. That Jesus was giving them signs, but they didn't have eyes to see. That they weren't really looking. They were looking, but they weren't really looking, if you know what I mean. They didn't want to see it, and therefore they wouldn't see it. And I think often the question is to us, if we want to see signs of God at work, we've got to open our eyes to it. And if you want to see God at work, you've got to look for it. And you've got to ask God to open your eyes. So I think to see signs, you've got to be open to see them. And if people don't want to see them, they won't. And if they do, then they will. And of course, Jesus points out here that the greatest sign they'll get of all is the sign of Jonah, down and up on the third day. Likewise, in his case, he'd go down into the earth on Good Friday and up again on Easter Sunday. So that's people that demand signs. I think often it's a question of asking people to open your eyes and look, and you will see. That's the third thing. I think the fourth thing really is about what to do with your life. Jesus frees us from evil and sin and so on, and can free us from sort of bad habits and changes our life. But there's this bizarre bit he talks about somebody having an evil spirit cast out, and then it gets cleaned around, and then 7 worse ones come. I think what it means is it's not enough just to be freed from evil. You have to be freed for good. And I think actually if Jesus frees us from evil, bad ways of doing things, we have to create good ones instead. Christianity is not simply a question of thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. It's about you shall love the Lord your God and you shall love your neighbour. It's about making sure we don't just not do bad things. It's about making sure that we do positive things. So when in Lent, for example, coming up, you might want to, people sometimes give something up. I think it's important that we don't just give something up, but that actually we take something up, that we use that time or that money or that was for something good instead. Otherwise, if you take one bad habit out, the temptation is that your mind finds another one, if you see what I mean. So Jesus didn't just free us from sin, he frees us for life with God. And it's not just about taking away bad things from our life, it's about filling our lives with good things. Eastern meditation is about emptying your mind. Christian meditation is actually about filling your mind with Christ. And it's important that we don't just empty our minds of evil, but that we fill our minds with God and with good as well. And finally, and fifthly, and this is really controversial, the other challenge that we can have is challenge from home. Challenge when our families don't share our faith with us. And that can be really hard because, it hurts because our families are very dear to us. But the other problem is, of course, with families is that they know what you really like, don't they? Ask my children, they'll tell you what Reverend Ben's really like and, how grumpy he is or whatever it would be and so on. And your family know what you really like. And so actually we can encounter sometimes, and often do encounter, cynicism and so on and opposition from our own families, from our nearest and dearest. And that can be really hard. And actually what this goes here is that Jesus encountered it too, that his mother and his brothers are outside. And I'm going to be really controversial here because huge portions of the Christian church make a big put a huge emphasis, especially on Mary and the Mother of God, and as sometimes referred, and because she's the mother of Jesus. But what I find strange is the Gospels, Mark especially and Matthew here, are quite keen, I think, to downplay the family of God. Jesus is quite clear here that those who follow him and obey God are his mother, his brothers and sisters. Notice Father is still God. But Jesus is quite keen to downplay his own biological family, if you like, and upplays instead the disciples, those who follow. I think that's quite interesting. So I take issue with huge amounts of the word the church, as I say, which puts a huge emphasis, especially on Mary. I mean, she's a remarkable woman and a great saint, and I totally agree with that. But I'm a bit controversial because I think the Gospels, Matthew and Mark, downplay her really to some extent because they're quite keen to emphasise instead that the family of God are those who follow, family of Jesus are those who follow Jesus. Controversial answers on the postcard to that one. So lots in this morning's reading. How to encounter hypocrites in the church. By their fruits you shall know them. And make sure your heart is right and the rest will follow. Second thing, people who are asking for a sign need to make sure they're looking for a sign to open to see. And of course the greatest one being Jonah, which is a sign of what Jesus was going to do. Thirdly, being a Christian is not just about emptying your life of bad stuff, it's about filling your life with God. And finally, that as Jesus' family are those who follow, those who do the will of the Father, which includes you and me. Have a lovely weekend. God bless you. And if you could share this message with your friends, that would be great. God bless you. Have a lovely weekend. And I'll